This morning I was looking on my Facebook feed, and HBO is seeking out stories about Florida man, and they say, "Tell us the craziest stuff you've ever done as a Florida man." And it's just frankly overwhelming because we did so much stuff before Florida man was a thing that I don't even know where to start. But I was reminded of when I lived in Animal House on the Rainbow River. I went out on the dock on the Rainbow River, and the sound really travels. And I was sitting on the dock relaxing, and I heard my buddy crank up his boat all the way in town. As soon as he cranked it up and got it up on a plane, I could tell who it was. The reason was it had a very distinctive sound, and it had a very distinctive sound taking off. We had a theory with our boats that you put the biggest possible available engine on it, and then you hopped it up to the most available horsepower, and then you put it pedal to the metal and see how fast it would go. Buzz was my best friend growing up. We played football side by side. I was outside linebacker, he was inside linebacker. I was the center, he played offensive tackle. We learned to like girls together. We got our first boats together. We started out with a 10-foot John boat with a 9.9 Mercury. By the time I lived on the Rainbow River, we had moved up to the biggest available engines they made at that time. Buzz had a 16-foot tunnel hole, was probably rated for a 90 horsepower. He had limited it to 200 horsepower because that's the biggest they made at the time. So it was probably 2.3 times maximum rated horsepower. But for that reason, it had real issues. It was hard to get going. It had so much horsepower that it would do what we call cavitate. When you push the throttle together, it would just push all the water out of the way and stay in the same place. It was insanely overpowered. But we wanted more power, but it was way maxed out. So I could hear him probably 2.5 miles away when he cranked up and tried to take off, because I could hear the engine screaming, but then I could hear the engine level off as he got going and he got up on a plane. So it was probably no more than 2 minutes before he came around the corner. I knew who it was all along. I could hear by the sound. I just waited on the dock on the river. I knew he would be along. And he knew I would be there because he knew I'd work through the night and I'd be on the dock. Where it kind of went off the rails is when he pulled up to the dock, I could see that grin. And this was my best friend, and you only have a way of reading somebody's mind with somebody that you've grown up with all your life. And you could look at him grinning and knowing like shit's about to happen that's really, you better be concerned. Usually that happened drinking late at night. It was unusual early in the morning, but I knew something was up before he said a word. He pulled up to the dock, he cut the engine. He says, "You won't believe what I found." And I'm like, "I have no idea. What did you find?" He said, "I was cleaning the boat yesterday, and it had 30-pound lead weights up in the nose of the tunnel hole on each side. I pulled those 60-pound weights out." And he said, "My boat will haul ass now." And I'm like, "You think those weights were there for a reason?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "This thing is really, really squirrely." He says, "You want to ride?" I'm like, what am I going to say no? So we got in, and at that time, I knew his boat would max out at 66. Now that's on the Rainbow River, which is now idle speed and full of people all the time. Kayakers, paddleboarders, and kayakers. This is back in the day when we had the river to ourselves. Now there was a speed limit at that time, but it was only a speed limit during the day. It was a speed limit from 9 to 5, was 5 miles an hour. Before and after 9 to 5, it was open season. That's why that Buzz came up in the morning. So I got in the boat, and he flipped his hat around, and it got on, and it pushed all the water out of the way, and it took about 2 seconds for the water to fill the void, and we took off. And that thing leveled off, and it was one hairy ride up the river. And it had a short windshield that was probably only 10 inches tall, which was like worse than nothing, because it served as pushing the air up over the nose of the boat right into your eyes. So it was worse than nothing at all, because it really blew the air right into your eyes. I glanced down at the speedometer, and we were doing 72. And he had that smile that he only had when it was really trouble was about to happen. We went from our house close to the bridge all the way to Rainbow Springs in probably 3.5 minutes, something like that. It's a 6-mile long river. We were less than a mile above the bridge, so it was probably a 3-mile trip at 70 miles an hour. So we ran the length of the river probably in 2.5 minutes. I couldn't see. We were going so fast that my eyes were watering and the tears would form up and just blow off the side of my face. It was crazy. I don't know how he could see, but it didn't matter whether I could see, but he was driving. Now, the whole time we're going around blind corners at 72 miles an hour. So I ran the entire length of the river, turned around, came back to the dock in 5 minutes. To this day, I have never been on a wilder ride, car, motorcycle, ATV. That was the epic journey. I thought about that 25 years later. I was the photographer for the Dunnellon football team, and I would shoot the pictures for the team. Often you have to shoot 300 to 500 pictures because to shoot pictures for a football game, it's a lot of action. It's poor lighting. You just have to shoot a lot of pictures and hope you get lucky. And so my Saturdays were spent cropping and evaluating the 500 pictures I took on the night before. On this particular day, my Airbnb rental on the Rainbow River was empty. So I early in the morning at daybreak, I went out on the picnic table. I got out my laptop computer. I put in the card, and I'm evaluating the pictures from the football game the night before. Totally peaceful. Totally peaceful. Could hear a pin drop. And I hear a boat running on a plane all the way in town. Now, back in the day, that was unusual. I could only hear Buzz's boat because of the unusual sound. Now it's idle speed the entire length of the river. I can't say in 20 years I've ever seen a boat running flat out on the Rainbow River. So I'm listening as it approaches, and I had my camera already sitting on the table. So I pulled the card out of the computer and put it on my camera. I said, I'm going to capture this as an unusual event. So I got up and I had my camera set at what I call machine gun style for the football game, where you take continuous pictures, 5, 8 per second, whatever the timing was. So it was preset for capturing a fast-moving action from the night before. My camera was sitting on the table, so I put the card in, turned it on, and waited for the card to go by, the boat to go by. Just stood there. I didn't even get out of my chair. I just waited for it to go by. I shot pictures of it going by and going, this is crazy. Who in the world is running 50 miles an hour on the Rainbow River through the idle speed zone? I've not seen this in decades. So I took the picture, I took the card, I put it back in. I went on to the Dunnellon Community Facebook page and I posted it, and I said with a caption to the community, if this is your son, you probably need to call him. There is nobody on this river that doesn't know it's idle speed, because most of these people don't ever remember a day when it wasn't. This is 25 years after the idle speed zone. I posted it up, and within 90 seconds, my phone is ringing. And I'm like, how did this go from Facebook community page to my phone ring? It's my buddy, Buzz. And he says, take that down before anybody sees it. And I'm like, take what down? He says, my son ran in the river on a plane. I'm like, well, excuse me. When I wrote that, if this is your son, you need to be calling him. I didn't know it was my godson. It was some random kid. I didn't see who it was. He's doing 55. He said, well, take it down and we'll discuss it later. So I come to find out when his mother called and his brother called and his uncle called me that there was a bass fishing tournament, and my godson was trying to get up to where the good bass fishing was. And he just thought he'd just shoot on up there because there's nobody on the river. And so I inadvertently took a picture of him, posted it out to the world, and not knowing it was my godson and the son of the guy who I ran the river with doing 72 miles an hour when we were teenagers. That's pretty Florida man as it gets, if you ask me. That was interesting, but I cut a lot of flack about that. They still don't like me. But I didn't know it was my godson when I posted it up. It was a kid behaving badly. I just didn't know what kid it was.